We all know Morrowind, right? It's just one of those games that the community loves and tells everyone to play, even though it might not have aged all that well. But whatever your personal opinion on the matter, the fact is that Morrowind was the real start of the Elder Scrolls' popularity, and Bethesda will make sure you never forget that. One thing that would remain the same no matter how well Morrowind would have done is the fact that Dark Elves appear in the games. Due to their appearance in Morrowind though, they're still the race with the most lore attached to them, even after all this time. And if there's something that Morrowind set up that I love way more than anyone probably should, it's the naming convention of the series. And this first showing is also pretty much unmatched. In Morrowind, almost every single NPC had a unique name, and seeing as we're in the homeland of the Dunmer, of course they're in the majority, with about 1400 unique names. For comparison, the number of unique Imperial names in Cyrodiil doesn't even reach 300, while Skyrim's Nords barely get 600. Morrowind characters were less developed and didn't need voice work for sure, but that doesn't detract from the fact that the Bethesda team had to come up with more Dunmer names in Morrowind alone than Imperial and Nord names in Oblivion and Skyrim combined. And that's not even counting other races. The point I'm trying to make here is that ever since Morrowind, the team never had to come up with that many Dunmer names, or that many names of any race in general. So you would think that they couldn't really mess it up, right? Well, this is Bethesda we're talking about after all. So without further ado, let's take a look at how Bethesda managed to screw up some Dunmer names, shall we? If you previously had some personal hangups with my objective statements, I'm looking forward to people's reaction on this more subjective material. So, first off, Oblivion. In Morrowind's Tribunal DLC, you may encounter a woman known as Gururin Selvilo. Nothing wrong here, but in Oblivion, we can encounter another Gururin Selvilo, in Coral. Two problems here. One, Gururin is a female first name, as female Dunmer first names almost exclusively end on a vowel, while male names end on consonants. The second problem of course being that they simply recycled the entire name while clearly depicting different characters here. And that's just lazy. Here, fix that name for you. Now it's a male name and it's no longer a ripoff. And then there's the proprietor of the Altscar Inn in Morrowind. She's called Boderi Farano, while in Oblivion there's this member of the Mages Guild called Boderi Farano. Again, I can't fathom why they just recycle names when trying to depict different characters. I understand recycling a first or last name, but a full name has to be done on purpose, right? At least this time the gender still matches. But on the other hand, that makes it even stranger since these are clearly not the same person. So here, fix your name. Now, for an example that's fully exclusive to Oblivion, and arguably more mind-boggling than the previous two, in the Imperial City you may find this woman named Mivrina Arano. And then there's the stable hand in Cheydinhal who's named Mivrina Arano. Guys, come on! What is this? Was the naming team asleep for this one? I'd almost rather you have copied another name directly from Morrowind than just copy one from the same game. The worst problem with this is the shared last name, which could indicate they're related. But we know that's bullshit. But there's also another woman with that last name, Tanasa Orano, who also works in Cheydinhal. I mean, really? Did they really have that little inspiration? And don't even try to hit me with the oh but they actually meant to have them be related, because if you honestly believe that, I'd wish I could be that naive. If they can think of family connections in Morrowind with thousands of Dunmer, then why is it so hard to keep track of around 80 in Oblivion? And we're not even done yet. There's also Aldos Otron, who randomly shares a surname with the necromancer Novini Otron, but my favorite case of Bethesda not caring in the slightest has to be with these good friends in the Imperial City. They are named Fatis Eulis and Dovin Aaron. Nice combination, right? Yeah, well, Bethesda thought so too when they had to name Braville's court wizard. Here he is, Fatis Aaron. I mean, what? Is this their long-lost love child? Did someone explicitly just splice these names together, or did they really have that little oversight of what names were being used? Here, my man, just take something. Anything. So that about covers the worst offenders for Oblivion. Keep in mind, this doesn't account for the ridiculous mistakes I covered in the past, like the Bosmer that are mistakenly marked as Dunmer, or the Dunmer that's mistakenly marked as an Altmer. I also haven't explicitly pointed out all the people that have misgendered names, just straight up bottom tier joke names, and many more just stupid mistakes that muddy up the naming convention. Things like Dranas Lorano and Dranas Letro I'll give a pass to. Not the two Ralsas though, those are also pretty bad. But before I give myself a stroke thinking about that, let's move on to Skyrim. Now, if you think that Skyrim is any better in this regard, then you would be completely right actually. Yeah, they really stepped up their game this time around. But there are still some stupid decisions with weird implications to be found. My favorite being the Sadri family. In Windhelm there's a merchant known as Revin Sadri. Nothing wrong there. But he has a sister known as Idisa Sadri. The only problem being that his sister isn't actually his sister. If anyone remembers my cut content episode on her, she's actually just a quick cover-up of a removed Argonian. Okay, not really ideal, but they're still meant to be related, so the shared surname is fine in this instance. But then comes the Dawnguard DLC, which gives us the high-ranking vampire Ferran Sadri, and then the Dragonborn DLC gives us the innkeeper Geldis Sadri. I would say they ran out of surnames, but the Dragonborn DLC is filled with unique Dunmer names. So what happened here? Well, I don't know. But I do know how you could fix it. Ferran Sadri is a very old vampire, so you could have easily given him a throwaway line of how the Sadri clan lived in droves around Skyrim even before the mass exodus of the Dunmer, or just that after the events of Oblivion, the Sadri clan was simply quite numerous. That way you could have easily justified the repeated usage of the name. The other shared family names aren't as numerous, but they are distracting. For example, in Riften you encounter Romlin Dread. He's a descendant of Valen Dread, who you encounter in Oblivion. He's named this way because a big part of his character is the relation between the two. And then there's Dawnguard's Taron Dread, who's just a random asshole. If it's now just a joke or status quo that every member of this family is some kind of archetype, like they're doing with the Motier family, then they're sucking pretty bad at it, because with the Motiers it's at least kind of endearing, here it just feels lazy. Same thing with the Guettarian family. You know them, right? You don't? Well, let me catch you up to speed then. So, in the Shivering Isles DLC you can encounter a mage that's part of an adventuring group. He's named Sindelius Guettarian. Of course, due to the DLC he's found in, he either ends up dead or insane. In Skyrim, there's a barrow that's supposedly haunted, except it isn't. It's actually inhabited by a mage that went insane by the name of Windelius Guettarian. Get it? Windelius, Sindelius, very similar characteristics. It's a nice callback, right? Okay, so who the fuck is Vanride Guettarian then? Vanride Guettarian is one of the unlockable merchants from the Thieves Guild questline that will appear in the Ragged Flagon. He's an armor merchant, but who exactly is he? Well, he doesn't really have a character. There's no lore about him, and he himself has nothing noteworthy to say either. Even the official game guide has nothing special to say. There is some dialogue by Glover Mallory on Ravenrock that references a male Dunmer named Vanride that taught him how to repair bone mold, that's an armor smith, and who lived in Riften at one point. So it's very likely that Vanride Guettarian was the one to help Glover along in life, even if he would never say so. But that's enough exposition about a mostly pointless character. What's with the name? Well, it seems to me like this is a very similar example to what we have with the Dread family. One person is a nice reference, while the other just randomly possesses the same surname. I should also mention that Vanride is a name very similar to Ride, as seen in Oblivion. However, there it ended on a vowel, thus making it a female name. Same with the name Slide from that game. See how Skyrim tries to learn from its past mistakes? One surname in Skyrim that's completely free from this sort of problem is the famous Lalu. As a previous great house, this family had many members, and it makes sense for two of them to be found in Skyrim. Belen Lalu and Neluva Lalu. Neither acknowledges the other, but both have enough of a backstory to make it all believable. This should be the golden standard, if I'm honest. Something that isn't the golden standard though, is what the Salot family does. Really, neither member serves all too much of a purpose. In the base game, Winterhold Steward is a layabout known as Malur Salot, Unlike Van Wright, I don't really need to explain his backstory in order for this to make sense. Once you reopen the mines in Raven Rock, 4 generic Dunmer miners will start working there. One of these is Evil Salad. Again, a very unnoteworthy character. Just weird they decided to recycle the name, since the other 3 don't have this issue. And the final familial fuck-up belongs to the Yulin family. Now, this is more of a retroactive fuck-up like the previous Salads, but this one is definitely more important. The Yulin family plays a pretty big role in the DLC's main story and are portrayed as a kinda vassal house that operated under Great House Lalu. This is all fine and well, except there already was a member of the Yulin family in the base game, Titus Yulin. Titus isn't all that relevant, but more importantly, nothing ever points to the fact that he's supposedly related to the former Great House. This might have been a nice tie to fellow Riften resident Niluva Lalu as well, but alas. Now I don't actually have a problem with the fact that Titus has nothing to do with the events of the Dragonborn DLC, since the role of the Yulin family was retroactively changed, but you know, Bethesda didn't have to slot in that family for the role. They were never previously mentioned, so they had a clean slate to write whatever, but they chose a duplicate. Yes, Vendel and Wheeler are way more interesting than Titus, but there are so many different ways this could have been solved without creating these weird implications. And yes, of course, I am fully aware that I'm putting more effort into thinking about this than Emil ever would, and that hindsight is 2020. But I guess overall, you can clearly see that the care for this kind of thing definitely evolved in a positive line. But like all positive things, it has to come crashing down eventually. So what if you had a game that basically got drunk on Sujamma and pissed all over the previously established rules? Well, see you next time for that one.